It's up to you whether or not you fall into these traps.
In the accompanying text with the albums that sometimes you're about to lose your mind in the creative process. Can you describe such a moment?
On these records, did I say that?
Yeah, I think so. It was somewhere in the text.
It might have been misconstrued. I think in the past, there was always this sort of sense that, and I think what it stemmed from was like an overinflated sense of self-importance that by making music, I had to engage in like the obsessive elements of it. Mm-hmm. You know, like I truly felt on some level that my music was synonymous with me as a person, and you know, in order for it to reach these emotional sort of depths that I was hoping to achieve, that I'd have to allow myself to go to these places that were like emotionally really unhealthy, right? With these records, which it may have been this that I was trying to get across, is that I wanted to make these records without that. I wanted to be able to make statements that were, in, for example, in the case of like the record Deconstruction, very complicated, mm-hmm. but have it under my control, you know, so it didn't affect me negatively emotionally. And whenever it did, because as with any sort of like artistic endeavor, there's elements where you get into it and you start working at it, and then you find that it becomes overwhelming or you become confused or whatever. And in the case of these records, in those circumstances, I just would turn the computer off and walk away, right?
But are you sometimes intimidated maybe by your own creations when you look at maybe a project that you've... Is it intimidating in a way, or are you always on top
when I
of
was
it?
high.
Yeah, but I mean that's what you've learned now, you think?
Well, yeah, it's been many years since I've like drank or smoked, and I think one of the goals of making this 4-record Devin Townsend project thing was to kind of deal with, you know, a fear of myself, because I think that if you've got any hang-ups about your ability to create whatever you do artistically, you know, I think that that stems from, in my case, in the past doing things that were counterproductive to my personal life based on, you know, things I was doing creatively. As I said, I get obsessed and then make mistakes based on, you know, basically being selfish, right? And so I think that doing these records, the whole goal is just like, well, if you deal with that fear, then really, you know, the process becomes a lot easier because I'm not second guessing it at all. I'm like, no, I know myself. You know, I'm a good dude. I'm not going to do things that are like sadistic or cruel musically because, you know, I've dealt with that element of myself and I'm confident with it.
But did you have the feeling that you needed all the 4 records, or were you already in the beginning of you wrote the first 3, I think, simultaneously, more or less?
All 4 were written simultaneously.
Okay, so did you need then maybe these 4 different, records, or were you already early in the writing process that you felt that you already overcome that thing, or was it just about in the end that you felt, okay, now I've succeeded what I wanted to do for myself?
I think that all the records were written to a large extent 3 years ago, mm-hmm. you know, but there was elements of it that were ready to be interpreted based on the kind of lessons that came from doing the one previous, you know, mm-hmm. and so as a result of that, some records, a song might get changed or a new one might be written, but the majority of the records and the theme were written all at the same time. However, I knew going into it that Deconstruction, the 3rd one, would be the one that would require the most kind of personal effort in terms of overcoming that fear of, I think in the long run, my ability to create kind of chaotic statements, right? But I guess what I wasn't prepared for is that each record brought its own challenge emotionally, right? Like, and ultimately by the end, I found that as much as I thought Deconstruction was going to be the most work, mm-hmm. they were all kind of equal in terms of like the things that I had to learn about myself and the people around me in order to finish it.
Was there one moment where in this process of the past 4 records that you said, well, that there was maybe a trap where you were almost about to fall into, that maybe going back to your previous way of working, was it you were on, did never occur to you?
Well, I think a lot of times, you know, one of the first things, even when writing it, the mm-hmm. first lesson, if you want to say that, not like it's a lesson, I just can't think of a better word right now, it's like, it's up to you whether or not you fall into these traps. You know, it's up to me to pick up a joint or to have a drink or whatever when I get stressed. That's a choice, right? Like, and so I think when all of a sudden I came to the point where I was just like, well, just don't choose that then. You know what I mean? It's
was not
easier
an
said
option
than done.
anymore,
Of course.
yeah.
Yeah, it isn't. You know, and I think that when you take that option away, to go back to it, I really think in that situation you're imposing your selfishness on not only your music and the audience, but also on your family and friends, right? And I think that there's elements of it that are self-destruction, and I think there's elements of it that are like genetic, and I think there's elements of it that are like addiction is like, in a lot of cases, a disease, right? However, you know, it is a choice, right?